start, I am going to speak about mindfulness based stress reduction and joy. I'd like to actually start with a poem, and I'm going to ask you to close your eyes. Admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, "Love me." Of course, you don't do this out loud, otherwise someone would call the cops. Still, though, think about this great pull in us to connect. Why not become one who lives with a full moon in each eye, that is always saying with that sweet moon language what every other eye in this world is dying to hear? That's a poem by Hafiz, 13th century, and I think it connects a little bit to what the panel got to this morning about, and I think it's the deepest kind of project of mindfulness training actually, opening up a training what Rasmus was saying, that helps us connect not only to ourselves, but also to start really feeling interconnectedness and the deep joy that brings, and the sense of purpose and kind of fulfilment of shared purpose in a way. So having more joy, there's a couple of ways we can go about this. One is obviously to kind of open to, in a kind of direct way, to kind of stimulate, to be open to take in, to savour, to kind of get a life that's got more joyful moments in it. The other way we can do it is to actually, and this is very important, you can't ask someone with a lot of trauma in their background or who's very depressed, very anxious, chronic pain, a lot of hardship in their life, just feel a bit more joyful, do a few positive affirmations. It kind of doesn't go anywhere. So one of the pathways, and just picking up what Tim was saying, to more joy is to actively investigate and to start undermining states of dis-ease, distress. And I think this is what a program of training in mindfulness really helps us start to be able to do. I'm in love with this person, he's my hero. I'll have to admit that in case I get too evangelical. This is what John says about what people are. People are geniuses if we let them be. And he kind of found a really good way to let them be. He was a molecular biologist, not a health professional, and he was really a very dedicated practitioner of mindfulness meditation and yoga. And he was working in a hospital setting, and the mindfulness training and yoga are really about reducing suffering and increasing joy, actually. And he wondered, could I create something that could be secular enough, because of the context of North America at that time, the religious context, that could be kind of contained enough, able to be offered in a hospital setting, over a few weeks, but also intensive enough so that people could actually get the brain changes that we now know happen. And he put together this thing that was based on his Vipassana practice, insight meditation practice, and based on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that's what I want to kind of wander us through in the next few minutes. How does the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and kind of practicing those in a systematic way, start transforming our life so we can actually start feeling some of this connectedness, interconnectedness. How many people know this definition? Paying attention on purpose in the present moment. There was a lot of hands up for meditators a while ago. It is a kind of definition, and everybody, it's a very common one. And it's not a definition. Apparently John was at a conference a couple of years ago, and someone was giving a paper on the definitions of mindfulness, which we have to kind of do and get clear on now, because we need to be able to research this and see how it works and how it doesn't work. And apparently he stood up, he was in the first row, and he stood up and he said, it's not a definition, it's an evocation to practice. It's a rousing, it's a summoning, it's a kind of really inviting people into these practices to start transforming their lives, which I kind of like that. There's a bit of a kind of discussion going on in our community, I think, about what constitutes practice. And you might hear this phrase, mindfulness without the meditation. And of course the informal practice, what Rasmus was saying about embodying this moment by moment, and that's where we live, isn't it? With our kids, with our jobs, with our travel to and from work, all the things we do. And if we're not bringing attention and care and awareness to those moments, we're kind of not there. But I reckon this idea of just, I do everyday mindfulness, I think, I'm just doing everyday Pilates. I don't go to any classes or train. I just sort of walk around, sort of aware of my core, sort of like, I don't think you're going to get the same kind of results. So I'm into a bit of formal practice. And I was really interested in our first two speakers today who spoke about high expectations. And this is a high expectations program. You know, ordinary folk are asked to come and do up to an hour a day, and people are like, what? But as a teacher, I think you can say, yeah, what? You're anxious and you're not prepared to do, it's 4% of your time doing an hour a day. And are you mad? So there's this high expectations environment and high affection. Very kind of loving environment in which to learn meditation. So that's what we do. We really encourage people to do both informal and formal practice. Isn't that gorgeous? Let's stop there. Mindfulness of the body. Isn't this just a beautiful picture of people, little people, present moment experiencing, opening to the sensory world with curiosity, investigation. They're not kind of worrying about where their next breath's coming from, incredibly. They're just like, right there, seeing what they can see and feeling that water. Just divine. And this is one of the things that people who come into the course, that's the invitation really, to start savouring sensory experience, to kind of be open to the touching, tasting, smelling, hearing, seeing of every moment, to really start entering the present moment and being kind of present for all of that. And one of the fantastic things it does to start opening to the sensory world is we get this beautiful experience of really noticing our conceptual world, a bit like what we did with Rasmus. You start trying to pay attention to something in the body, the breath, and suddenly you realise all the stuff you're thinking. And you start to see the shape of that conceptual world too. But really people start having this experience of their aliveness. And one of the other things this practice does is to people start noticing when they start paying very fine attention, and this is through awareness of the best practice, body scanning through the body systematically, like for about 45 minutes. It can be boring as hell as well and irritating. And when you listen to the body in that way, you don't have the experience that those babies are necessarily having. You have the pain, you have your anxiety, you have your depression, you have your worries that are manifest in the body. And you start getting to know a lot about your threat defence system. You start being able to listen well and start hearing and seeing and feeling and tasting the early moments of the threat defence system, whether you're the angry one or the fearful one. Good thing we have this threat defence system, but really wonderful to start to get to know it, and when we know it better, we can attend to it sooner, open up to the next moment, which, you know, so this is part of the undermining suffering, to really start getting to know this. The other lovely thing that happens when people pay attention in this way, and I think, our researcher presenter was speaking about this in a more sophisticated way, but we're activating a caregiving system when we're lying down, sitting, paying attention to all our moment-by-moment experience. Dan Siegel has this lovely hypothesis, really, that what we're doing when we do mindfulness practice is activating the caregiving, the social circuitry in our brain that's activated when we're around loving, empathic, good enough parents. Now, not all of us had those parents, but I quite like the sense that when we're practicing, we're actually, in a way, activating that social circuitry, becoming our own empathic, caring one. And this is really profound with people who are really suffering with all sorts of psychological and physiological kind of distress. Isn't that a great pig? So the next invitation in Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction is to start paying attention to the fact that there's pleasurable experience. Let's go there. Rick Hanson says that the brain is hardwired to be Velcro for unpleasant experience. We hang on to it. Teflon for pleasant experience. So really pay attention to the moments of joy in your life. Like savour, be there, notice. So much is just a wonderful thing to be engaged with, and to take it in, let it soak into the neural pathways in your body. Let yourself open to have those moments. But it doesn't last, damn it. There's neutral moments, there's unpleasant moments, and they kind of happen, don't they? Like there's no way we can kind of stop the flow of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral arising. So we're training people up in a way to not get too hung up on striving for things to be a certain way, not get like really undermining our aversive response. Like, why have your whole life being aversive to things that are unpleasant when they're going to come? How about getting a capacity to be investigative, to be curious about even unpleasant things? Fairly radical in terms of people being able to be more at ease, less reactive, less phobic about unpleasant, less in that horrible struggle of, I don't want to experience this. This invitation really opens up a lot of freedom and joy in people. That's our Mark Twain, fantastic again. I had a melanoma about 4 years ago, and it was a very bad one. I grew up in Broome and Derby and Port Hedland in Western Australia, and the first dermatologist said, look, you should go and write a will, basically. And I was like, oh. And I had 3 years to wait to see if it was going to come back. And it didn't come back, but I had quite a lot of work to do with my mind states over those 3 years, falling into, my kids losing me losing my kids. Just, many of us in this room would have had that same kind of provocation. Or have a loved one face it, like we're all going to have to face it. But the practice was fantastic in terms of me recognising those mind states that can be so constricting, and so constricting of the reality that I was alive with these people I loved, with work I loved, with the gorgeous Sydney weather, the beach every morning. But I'd be in this mind state going down to the beach, not able to take any joy in because I was so preoccupied in this kind of eddy which had captivated me. And I love this way of talking about it, that we're helping people, we're inviting people to what they were subject to, that becomes the object of investigation. So feeling depressed or anxious becomes an object of investigation. Very liberating. So all of the mind states that might be coming and going all day are actually objects that you can start observing, like the weather. It's cultivating this spacious, grounded, kind of more equanimous, less reactive ground to hold the flow of life. So the mind states might still come and go, but there's this different context to hold those experiences in. And people start even feeling the joy of efficacy, the joy of being able to look after themselves well. Once they start seeing that, I'm not so reactive, I'm anxious, but I don't mind. I'm stressed, but I can see the pattern of it. So that can bring a lot of kind of efficacy pleasure. I can look after myself well. I don't have to be so reactive. So very important, to start cultivating the capacity to be present, not whinging that winter's coming, but actually be able to go, we're transitioning from, autumn to winter. And this is the biggest kind of picture, isn't it? That what the Buddhists reckon, if we really pay attention in this way to these three foundations of mindfulness, this is what we discover. This is the sort of MBSR way of saying it. Life sucks and sings. Everything changes. Don't take it personally. I love this. And this is the start of the interconnectedness too, or the kind of dawning of the interconnectedness. People in these groups, I love the heterogeneous group model, because you've got someone who's got serious cancer, someone who's got an anxiety disorder, a mum who's out of control with her kids, a high-stressed, a few lawyers. We get quite a few lawyers, actually. And all in the same room, all kind of realising, the structure of my stress is actually a bit similar to that person who's got cancer, but how can that be? So this interconnectedness starts happening when people start realising that a lot of the suffering is coming from pushing away and pulling towards. And this thing, even from learning how to relate to your body sensations in a less identified way, loosening up this I, me, mine, let alone pleasure and unpleasure, getting less identified with having to feel a certain way because that defines me. And we're all, like this interconnectedness arises, we're all in the same boat, very relieving for people. Much more joy living from that place of, I belong. Just because I am in this camp with this suffering doesn't mean I'm not part of the human race. And I think this idea of this project of, being a certain way, isn't that gorgeous? And have a look the next time you're feeling rather pleased with yourself, full of self-esteem. I reckon it always involves this little thing about, oh, I'm special, I'm sort of better than her, or, you know, a bit smarter than him, or, and that ultimately, because the next day, or the next 40 minutes, you're going to be a duffer, you're going to make some idiot mistake, so, you know, and then you're worse than them. Like the suffering involved in this, and it can lead to some rather unfruitful sort of projects, you know. So the other thing that I feel like MBSR is a kind of faithful translation of the 4 foundations of mindfulness from Theravadan Buddhism. So there's a big emphasis on kindness from day one, just like even how we hold the group, like containing the group so that there's kind of respectful, kind communication, even under duress, because it's a stressful process for people. John Kabat-Zinn says, this stress reduction program is really stressful. You're making so many changes, even to your daily life, to be able to do this damn practice, you know. So it's transformational in that, but in a context of kindness, again, high expectations from the teacher, and by about week 4 from the group, like everyone gets involved in, you know, how did it go with your kids, or how are you managing that pain, or and high affection, which is this real cultivation of kindness. That's the kind of one of the first attitudinal foundations we're asking people to bring to their experience moment by moment. Now, I have a niece. When she was 12, she got a surfboard, and she came back. We're at Margaret River down south. The waves weren't too big that day. She comes back after about 10 minutes, throws it down on the ground next to her dad, and says, "It doesn't work." And which I just loved. And I'm hearing this more and more in my clinical practice. People will come to me and say, "Oh, I don't want to do that mindfulness stuff, it doesn't work, I've tried it." Or people thinking about coming to MBSR, "No, mindfulness, I've tried it." And when I ask them what they've done, I just think, oh, I don't think you've done these 4 foundations of mindfulness, and practicing every day and being in a context of safety and heartfulness and receptivity. I think you've just been told to, just pay attention to your anxiety, or go to the breath when you know. So, interesting question. I think we just, and if you've tried mindfulness and it hasn't worked, I'd invite you to do a bit more of it and see what happens. Like it's a kind of, surfing's a process, isn't it? It's not a thing. So, same with mindfulness. So let's just take a moment to maybe do some of this connecting where we started with this morning, actually. This sense of, you might even want to close your eyes, just connecting to this moment, this breath, this body experience right now. Maybe connecting to this good company that we're travelling in this room. And also letting your mind go wider and taking in our communities, our countries, holding the world in your heart. And just see how that feels, to feel a connectedness, like we might have some potential to kind of connect with the world and make a difference. And just seeing what that brings in your body, in your mind, in your heart right now, to connect with that possibility. And if you want to know more about teacher training or some other things we're doing in Australia with Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, contact us at Openground. We've got a great bunch of teachers. Thank you so much.